Finally! I've wanted to review one of these for a while now. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. There's some sort of a signature on the case, so you know it's gonna be something good if I'm this excited. We are going to talk about the Tak Matsumoto Signature Firebird today. That's right, if you love Firebirds, you are going to be very disappointed. Because this model takes everything that you know about a Firebird and changes it. It still looks like it's neck through construction, but it's actually a set neck. We no longer have the Firebird headstock, it's just straight up Gibson Les Paul. The body has been slightly shrunken down so it doesn't feel as massive. It's got a figured maple top, and it's got all the regular Tak Matsumoto appointments to it. But if you're not familiar with who he is, the way I explain it to American viewers is he's essentially the Slash of Japan. That's how popular and as much of a household name as he is. He's primarily known for his work within the Bees, but he does solo and other supergroups. And he was the first guy out of Japan to get a signature guitar within Gibson's history. Now previously on the show, we've documented his other signature models like his very unique double cut, but he also has regular Les Paul stylings. And he has so many different versions of all those guitars, from Carina to super fancy colors, from the Epiphone lineup to Gibson USA to custom shop. Tak is no stranger to signature Gibson models. But this was definitely that last one that I had to check off my list of documentations. Because I'm a Firebird guy and I just love everything that this one has. It's so unique. And until you have something in the flesh, you can't really say what it is or isn't. This thing weighs nothing, which is strange for a Firebird because they're usually so heavy. Because previously to today, my favorite Firebird has to be the custom shop Johnny Winter. It has the best playability and that traditional Firebird sound that I've always been after. But seeing them side by side, you can definitely notice some of those differences, and we'll talk more about that later. But what is the story behind the Tak Firebird? In December of 2012, Matsumoto reached out to Edwin Wilson and his team at the Gibson Custom Shop to let them know that he was interested in recreating his favorite modified Firebird, but he wanted to redo it with a better body balance and playability. So with Tak being such a big name, they took on his challenge to start designing this new Firebird that both Gibson and Tak could be proud of. So what Tak brought to the table was he wanted the Les Paul headstock on it. And if you're thinking he's the first guy to ever do that, nah, here's a photo of Johnny Winter using one way back in the day. Next up, he wanted the neck profile to be similar to what they used on the custom shop DCs or regular Les Pauls. Had to be two humbuckers with a signature Tak layout and appointments. If you're not familiar with what that means, we're talking 3 knobs on here instead of your traditional 4, and hey, all right, we got a toggle switch right here on a Firebird instead of usually having a pick guard over here and it being there. And Tak loves his abalone. It's on almost every single one of his signature guitars, and it's almost always paired with black binding. But what Gibson brought to the table was, hey, how about a flame maple top? To which I imagine Tak said, sure, sounds cool to me. The first prototype was delivered to him at Nissan Stadium when he was doing sound check. Here's what the first prototype looks like. It was the classic vintage sunburst finish. He noodled around on it a bit and talked to the guys and decided that was not exactly what he was going for. It was good, but still needed some refinements. The second prototype he was later presented with featured a very unique cherry finish. You might notice that that one looks extra evil and cool, and that's because it had a different pickup set in it from Sir, although I'm fairly confident he probably put those in rather than Gibson. That color was never used again. However, it's prototype number 3. The main thing that he requested to change is he didn't think the body was the right size. It still felt off to him, so he asked them to slightly reduce it by a couple of percentages. So in May of 2024, now please keep in mind information is a little bit jumbled online and hard to find for this model, but I believe that's probably the date when prototype number 3 gets to him, because the article I found said that was the second prototype, and that just seems to be too long when they didn't change anything until Proto 3. But that's when Trans Black happens, that's when the body shrunk, and that's when it gets its approval. And then less than a year later, March of 2015, these are public. Offered only in vintage sunburst finish and Trans Blackburst, with an original street price of 529,200 yen. And at that time, backing out sales tax, that was probably somewhere around 4,800 USD. There is rumors of a blue one being made that I found found while researching this topic on Yahoo Japan, but there's no official photo evidence of that. Now, how many of them were made? Unfortunately, there's no official published number. It was just advertised as a limited number of units per month. Overall, do I think they were insanely popular by any means? No. Firebirds are a very niche thing, but let me tell you, if you're a Les Paul guy who's always wanted to try a Firebird but didn't like the pickup choices, or you've picked one up and felt they were like really neck heavy or something, I'm sold on this, and I haven't even plugged it in yet. This is a very well-balanced guitar. And I think Gibson was pretty proud of their work too, because I used to say, hey, this is like a Slash Firebird. Now, previous to doing my research, I didn't realize the Tak Matsumoto came out a full 2 years before that, because the Slash Firebird is 2017. It's also a set neck with a flame maple top, but it still has the traditional Firebird headstock, but was also offered in the same trans ebony flame top, as well as just a straight up aged white with dual humbuckers. But those were limited to 25 of each, so I don't imagine there were tons and tons of these Tak Matsumoto Firebirds made either. But hey, Gibson, I know you got the design somewhere. Maybe you should take this thing out of the vault and just make it a regular production. I would be okay with a set neck Gibson USA Firebird if it looked something like this and had these body proportions. Well, let's see here. As compared to a custom shop historic Firebird, those are 1.6 inches in the middle, whereas this one's 1.56, so they have slightly thinned the body. Man, it looks like they really thinned out those wings too, to where we've got 1.25 here, and it's 1.26, so not a lot, but that looks a lot thinner. But look, we've got an output jack on the side. Didn't notice that before. I guess while we're at it, let's see if that's consistent over here. 1.21. Whoa, versus about 1.25. He really thinned out that side. And then as far as the body shrinking, it looks like he took off a lot right here and just swooped it in a bit more and slightly shrunk this horn. We've got 4.65 on our TAC, whereas it's 4.79 on a historic spec. Then checking down here, 4.98 and 5.08. Our total wingspan is 23 inches on a historic, whereas on our TAC it's about 22 and an eighth. And measuring at the top of each heel, it's about 1/8 inch smaller. So yes, the body's smaller, but don't forget the vast size difference to your headstock. You're looking at 9 inches on a Firebird versus just a little bit more than 7 on a Les Paul. So each dimension really hasn't changed too much, but when you add it all together, it certainly does add up and completely changes the feel of the instrument. I just love that they gave it the faux neck through vibes on the top, because if it wasn't for that, I don't think it would still feel like a Firebird. I'm sure there's some other guys that'll argue that, hey, they should have left a pickguard on it, but I'm really glad they didn't, because the trans black burst has a really nice almost green tinge to it, and having the black plastics and binding really just transforms the look as well. So hopefully you found that entertaining. I can totally see why Tak was elated with the results of their little project that they did a decade ago. But now please keep in mind, I see this quite often. There's a guy trying to sell a Tak Matsumoto Firebird case on eBay. All those changes make it so you can't put a regular Firebird in here. In fact, doubly so, because the body doesn't even fit. And you couldn't jam that headstock in there even if you wanted to. And if you're thinking, Trogly, just push it, it'll fit. No, it just doesn't. Even if you try to compress the foam, the body is too significantly different. So even if you've converted your Gibson Firebird into a headless one, nah, it's not gonna fit. This is strictly for one guitar and one guitar only. And as far as case candy, here's what this one has. The sheet that talks about the combo lock on the case, which, wow, 2015 having a combo lock? He had to have specifically requested that. I'm pretty sure Gibson was done with that in the 2000s. But here's our pre-pack checklist filled out as a Tak Firebird, born in March of 2015. Here's our owner's manual that I think had the warranty card originally, because that's been ripped off. This was sold used by Ishibashi Music. I actually ended up buying this one from a viewer of the show. He was looking to let it go, and I made him an offer, and after a little bit of back and forth, we made it work. And then very importantly, we have the COA booklet with Tak's signature. And on the inside, we can see him holding one of those beautiful guitars. And oh my goodness, is this really serial number 8? Again, I don't think they made that many of these, but that is cool. And it looks like this model did come stock with Schaller strap locks, so the counterparts are in the case. We've also got a black medallion, as well as a Gibson custom pick holder. I don't know about you guys, but I'm quite happy with the information I was able to pull up about these, but I want to know more. Let's go ahead and throw it onto the workbench to take an individual look at all these parts and specs. I'm very happy I took the time to polish this one because the top wasn't moving too much, but now that I've done that process, it's actually quite phenomenal. So let's go ahead, dive into our pickups. They are zebra bobbined, and Tak is a big fan of the Burstbucker pickup set, so that's what we have in here. The Burstbucker 2 in the neck position, and the Burstbucker 3 in the bridge. Technically, you find these more commonly in Gibson USA products, but these utilize the Alnico 5 magnets. And pickup readings, I'll have to get back to you on because I think there's something wrong here. But here we can see the inside pickup cavities. That routes down through to the mahogany body, so it gives you a little bit of a color variation. But if we move our 3-way toggle switch wire, you can see where the long neck tenon ends. So if it's not going to be neck through, long neck tenon's your next best thing. These two gouges out of the wood make for an interesting smiley face. But here's a good shot if you're curious how thick the maple top is. It reminds me a lot of the 80s CMT series, as it's just a little bit over a 1/4 inch thick. But you can actually see that on the edge of the instrument. It does not have black binding on the body. However, it is so dark, when I take my flashlight away, this is what you normally see. But I found this rather fascinating. You see that V-cut section right here? This is still constructed traditionally as 2 separate wings that join onto a centerpiece. So this is a 3-piece body. So this is one of few Firebirds where they actually had to make the centerpiece themselves and it not also be the neck. But we can see the maple top thickness is even. It just steps down. So I don't know for sure how they constructed this, but it seems to me it was a mahogany piece and then they laminated the maple on top of it, and they did the same for this piece and then the same for that piece. Because prior to today, I just thought this was a regular body and then they put a maple top on it and then they just routed it a little bit deeper over here. But that does not actually appear to be the case. Now, routing wood down deeper, I would imagine would change the figuring a little bit, but that centerpiece looks like a completely different style of maple. Whereas the outer edge wings, they seem to be very consistent. And given the choice between the 2 production finishes, I've always liked this trans blackburst the best. However, the cherry sunburst one lets you see that kind of flamed figuring binding a lot better. Here's a good photo of that with Tak playing one. So that's really fascinating. And the more I was looking at this one, I was thinking, why is it called trans black? Because this is totally Cobra burst. Well, look right here. Here you can see the original finish, and it was more of a trans black, but as the clear coat has ambered, it's turned more into Cobra, which I've always been a big fan of that finish, so to have that on a cool, unique Firebird, hey, why not? But it's mounted with the good stuff, true ABR1 bridge. It is of the full weight variety, Gibson ABR1 branded. Then you get your lightweight aluminum nickel plated stop bar tail piece. But the Tak Matsumoto layout just gets rid of an additional tone, so it's regular volume controls for the neck and bridge, and then a master tone. And you might notice, hey, what's with these knobs? Why are they all cracked? That's very common on custom shop models. Now, usually I go for the cleanest example to document as I can and add to my collection, but this one, I just wanted to review it so bad. This is a more so player's grade edition. You can see somebody's picking has worn through the finish right here. As we shine the light over it, you can see many a nicks and dings into the top, especially down here. Somebody had to have gigged this thing quite heavily. But yet it doesn't appear absolutely trashed after I polished it up and cleaned it. I'm not exactly sure if I'm holding on to this one or what. I do want one in my collection. We'll have to see how it plays. But moving on from our 3-piece mahogany body with maple top, we've got a regular mahogany neck with a rosewood fretboard. As we were talking earlier, it's got the black binding, which means you do have the black fret nibs. And the abalone inlays work incredibly well with our more Cobra burst-like finish now, because sometimes this can just look way too fancy on a guitar, but it blends all the other colors quite nicely. I believe the viewer that I purchased this guitar from said he utilized my technique for polishing the frets, and I will say he did a fantastic job. However, whoever gigged it definitely had long fingernails. You can see some mild fretboard wear from that, as well as some light wear to the frets. Now let's grab our neck dimensions. 1.695 at the nut, 2.07 at the 12, 0.84 first fret neck depth, and 0.94 exactly at the 12. Based on my experience, I would classify this as a medium C-shaped neck profile. So if you like skinny necks, probably not for you, but you might be able to get around with it. But the thing with a lot of Firebirds is they have a really wide feeling neck. This has kind of narrowed that down just a little bit. And it's a completely different neck profile as compared to 90s Firebirds that have like that really thin D shape. There's a look at that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. Just a nice full feeling C shape. Gets really rounded up there. But now we can move on to the face of the headstock. Got all the dust and everything cleared off. Blink and you'll miss it. You do have a Tak Matsumoto silkscreen on the headstock, as he does on many of his signatures. But he doesn't want it to be super in your face or anything. It's there for the fans, but anybody who doesn't care for it, it's not that noticeable. But this particular piece of pearl in this one really came to life after I polished it. It's got a lot of green in it, which matches our abalone. But it's got some nicks and dings along the edge, especially right there. That one's tempting to touch up. But our truss rod appears to be in great shape, and it's a historic style beveled edge one. Speaking of historic style, this has the low footprint vintage clusins on it, which gives it a very nice look. And now we can move on to the backside, where the majority of the damage is. Must have caught someone's button or something. It really marred up the finish there. And we've got a whole bunch of stuff going on back here. However, most of that appears to be just within the clear coat, so in theory, if you wanted to refinish the instrument, I don't think you'd have much damage to have to sand out, but I don't think anybody's going to be refinishing one of these. However, I say that. This is probably one of the cheaper Tak Matsumoto models out there. For whatever reason, they're just not as popular as his double cuts and singles. But so far, I'm digging it. I really like this. I think a lot more people need to try these, because I didn't even realize how different this was until I did all this deep dive. And maybe other people are the same. But you can see your beautiful mahogany wood grain through our very dark finish. I wouldn't even call this trans black. This reminds me a lot of the DC rust finish, just a little bit darker. But then I love this a lot. You get to see the flame maple cap through our control cavity. We've got a bumblebee capacitor on our master tone. And they really just jammed those volume controls as far over as they could. Not like they don't have a whole bunch of extra room over here. It really looks like they just needed to move the route up a little. And we have this barrel style jack going through here. But whoa, that's weird. It only has one wire going to it because they're able to ground it off because it's just touching the pot there. I don't think I've ever seen that before. Now let's see if I can troubleshoot here. If you remember correctly, I was telling you earlier I couldn't get readings out of it, so I wanted to toy around, and yeah, sure enough, this guitar doesn't work. So now I need to figure out, is it the output jack, something in the wiring? So let's take the readings direct from our pickups. So in order to do that on a Gibson style pickup, you put one of your contacts on the ground and one on the hot wire, and then you should get the reading, which this pickup is about 9. So besides taking it through the circuit, you can also do the same thing just with the bare part of the wires. And unfortunately, I'm getting 0s on both pickups, which it's not common at all for pickups to die in a guitar, especially one that's only 10 years old. Now if we look really closely here, that doesn't necessarily look like factory solder work, so it could be a whole variety of factors, including that there's a short happening within the pickup lead. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this one out to do some more testing. So now let's see what we're working with here. All right, so now I get a reading, so that tells me something was up with the solder work there. But now it doesn't work when I have it back in the circuit. At least that test let me know both pickups likely work. So from there, I was thinking maybe one of these pots got busted in shipping, because that's totally possible. I mean, we already talked about all these cracks. That's usually because a jostle or jolt goes poof. I decided to test the pickups again within the circuit utilizing different anchor points, and then I got it. So that tells me the pot was probably working. So my next suspicions were the tone pot. Maybe that's the busted one. So I actually took this wire right here and I desoldered it, and I used my alligator clips as a jumper from that to the pot direct, and everything was working having that plugged in. So then after messing around a little bit more, it just started working. It's possible there was a cold solder joint here, or maybe it got jostled around in shipping, because I even reached out to the seller and he's like, nah, I didn't have any problems like that, but feel free to let me know if we need to go get this rewired or something. He wanted to make sure we were all good. He said, you know, sometimes the toggle switch would cut out a bit on him, so I messed around with that to tighten that up. But now we've got our readings of 8.56k ohms in the bridge, neck 815, and then the middle, just for fun, 4.18. So I wish I could tell you what the moral of that story was, but sometimes wiring's just weird. I did find out though that that is the ground. This is where if your guitar utilized a battery, it would go. So yeah, technically you can just run a wire from there and directly solder your ground to a pot if it happens to touch. But we've got a couple of dings around the edges as well. And we can also take a look at our toggle switch cavity. It's interesting how they route these. It's a little bit deeper in this area, so we see the maple top, but then on the other side, it's still the mahogany. But usually you would have a drill run going this direction in a Les Paul, but since this is a multi-piece body, they actually routed it right here. That way they could go into the neck pickup cavity, as we were seeing earlier, and then be transitioned down here. So here's a look at our medallion that was stock from the factory, and our other back plate as we continue on to the neck. If you still weren't convinced that it was a set neck, there you go. You can see your seam line right here before you get the same finish going on up here. Now it is important to note that somebody had some lotion or something on that has discolored the finish in this area. That does not polish or clean off. I tried my best. So that's a chemical reaction on the finish. Now thankfully it's a dark finish. It's not overly apparent, but we do have a few other dings and scuffs on the neck. But here's our Gibson Custom Shop decal and the backside of our single ring, single line Kluson tuners. And these were serialized as such. TM for Tak Matsumoto, FB Firebird, and then what number it is. This one is 8. And of course, it's a Gibson headstock. You're gonna have some dings along the edges. Let's do a blacklight test just for fun. Make sure there's no breaks, cracks, or repairs, because somebody enjoyed playing this. Got nice even glow here, but once again, another way to see all our dings. Face of the headstock looks good to me, outside of that one area we already talked about. And our back finish definitely glows a little bit more, and you can see there is some clear coat wear. And I forgot to point that out earlier, there is a little bit of a rub down to the bare wood. And our neck definitely has some sweat absorption to it, but thankfully, no breaks, cracks, or repairs. We're good. But that's cool to see the maple with black light. Same yin-yang thing over here. Oh, wow. I thought this thing was light, but I would have never guessed 6 pounds, 9.6 ounces. It feels like a feather. It's really good. So let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this one sounds. Those are some very distinct tones. It's got that woody tone. Where's our bridge? And they blend together as such. I also want to make mention of just how loud and resonant this guitar is. Listen to it through the camera. You feel the neck vibrating when you play, and it's much brighter sounding acoustically than my Johnny Winter. And the feel difference between these, like this is really neck heavy. Whereas putting this thing back on, the body feels like nothing. However, it still has a little bit of heftiness to the neck, so it does feel heavier than that weight suggests, because it pulls down on your strap just a little bit more. But in comparison, yeah, it feels like you could play this a lot longer. I compare the tones, but regular Firebird pickups versus humbuckers, way different. As far as the tones go, I actually really dig it. However, from a playability standpoint, this one really needs a setup. I've noticed this top high E string, it has a sitar-like ring to it if you keep it in the saddle, so I just have it right next to it and then it rings out a bit more. But I'm having a real hard time keeping this guitar perfectly in tune, so I think it needs a bit of a intonation setup as well as a nut filing. I did add some lubrication to it, but it seems this might need a bit more than that. I also noticed it doesn't have much sustain. Like, it's there, but it's not ever apparent. I mean, maybe we could turn up the gain to help that. Yeah, that helps. All right, so final thoughts on the Tak Matsumoto Firebird. I've always wanted to document one of these just because I thought it was a really strange bird that didn't have a pick guard and had a figured maple top. I did not realize the body had been shrunk, and there's a bunch of other cool things about it too. Like, I would have never guessed the average poundage on this is like 6.5 to 7. These are incredibly lightweight guitars, and they just feel so vastly different. I'm surprised more people didn't take a liking to these, but to be fair, they weren't necessarily readily available in the United States. As far as you could go to any dealer and check one out. But I think if Gibson USA could produce something similar to this, because I get it, they want to do set neck Firebirds now, but I would still love to have that raised back portion and the top, because even as a Firebird snob, I kind of like this. It still feels Firebirdy enough, even if it doesn't have the true neck-through construction. So my personal recommendation is, yeah, try one of these if you ever see one. You might enjoy it if you've always found other Firebirds to be a bit too cumbersome, neck-heavy, heavy in general, whatever it is. Or maybe you like Firebirds and you just want to try this one too. I had a good time with this one. But if you're interested in being the next owner of this particular Player's Grade 1, I think I will put it on my website. Maybe find myself a slightly cleaner one another day, but at the same time, wouldn't mind having this one. It is a pretty nice player. It just needs a little bit of a tweak to our setup. But all right, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoy your newfound guitar knowledge, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.